Who is the most underappreciated New Orleans Saint on the roster going into 2022? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over at USA Today's Saints Wire Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at betonline.net. They've got more odds, lines, and props than ever before. Go and check them out, BetOnline, where the game starts. On today's episode, we're going to be joined by NFL.com's Cynthia Frelund, the one and only analytics expert. You can follow her on Twitter at CFrelund, Frelund. We're going to talk a little bit about the New Orleans Saints, what the kind of win probability outlook is according to the analytics, and who the most underappreciated New Orleans Saint is going into 2022. And it's a name that's always been on the rise. So we're going to wrap up today's show with a quick look at a wide receiver you should be keeping an eye out on that could potentially find his way onto the 53-man roster, depending upon how many wide receivers the Saints keep. And we'll wrap up with a quick look and our final look at the best O-line in the NFC South based on the run game. We got all that coming up for you in today's episode. We're going to start off with Cynthia Frelund, analytics expert over at the NFL.com, and what she had to say about the most underappreciated New Orleans Saint on the roster. Cynthia, such a pleasure to welcome you here on the Locked On Saints podcast. Very much appreciate you taking the time to come through and be with us today. I know you're coming hot off of the match, so we appreciate you taking the time to come through for the show.
Oh, so much fun. And I'm so glad to be here. You know, I was just thinking, I haven't been to New Orleans since before the pandemic. So I need to figure out a little bit of a trip. Maybe I'll wait until it's not like the hottest time of the entire year. But I definitely need to get a trip down there because it's one of my favorite cities. I love everything about it. I gain 10 pounds just when I land, and it's always worth it.
Yeah, that's the humidity right there. That's what that is. That's all the water. Maybe coming through for that Saints and Bengals game might be a good one for you to come and visit for, because that's certain to be some fireworks right there. Oh
yeah, I mean, look, any of them are. I have never had a bad time. Obviously, I've never had a bad time at a Saints game. So I'm excited. I was actually even there for like a Final Four. And I have yet to run. I'm trying to run like a marathon in all the different states, and I haven't run one in New Orleans yet. So I gotta get. That's where I'll pick my Louisiana one. So
gotta love it. Gotta love New Orleans. Absolutely. Well, look, whenever you make the trip through, you know you'll be welcome. You know you'll be treated well. That Southern hospitality always coming through, and hoping to show you a little bit of Southern hospitality here as well. So I really appreciate you coming through for the show. I wanted to start by highlighting a piece that you wrote that's up over at NFL.com. Underappreciated players. You do this annually, looking at underappreciated players from all 32 NFL rosters. Before we hit your selection for the New Orleans Saints, what's some of the criteria that's a part of the selection process for this piece?
So we had to kind of draw the line in the sand somewhere because, you could argue underappreciated means whatever, lots of different things. Mm-hmm. So it can't be a first round pick. Now, I will say there was one exception to that one, and that's on the Falcons. Their roster is not my favorite roster, so I had to kind of go with someone who underperformed, then now has started to pick it up. So other than that, that was the one caveat there. Almost never first round picks, but definitely no all pros. Mm-hmm. Not too many Pro Bowls. I try to limit it to, if they've been to one, like, okay, maybe, but
sure.
That's the rare exception. But they have to be guys who, nationally speaking, are not necessarily guys when like Michael Thomas, even though he hasn't played, wouldn't qualify, right? Sure. And Jameis Winston, well, he certainly wouldn't qualify. And Michael Thomas, I was a second round pick, so I guess on that regard, but he set an NFL record, so not going to qualify. It has to be guys that have a little less of the shine that we hear all the time. My favorite player on your team, he was on this list before. I love Cam Jordan as well, but again, not qualified because they're a little too many of the accolades that kind of make them more nationally well known.
Now, don't worry, Saints fans. We're going to hear about the favorite player on the team. We are going to get to that. Don't you worry. But I want to start off with this year's selection for the New Orleans Saints, second-round linebacker out of Ohio State, Pete Werner. Now he's going into his second year as well here. What was it that stood out for you about Pete Werner that, first of all, establishes him as underappreciated, but what's the production look like from your side as an analytics expert?
Yeah. So when I look to see, like, you can look at his 62 tackles, which was ranked number 14 amongst defensive rookies, and say, okay, 14, like, whatever. But then you have to remember, he didn't play the full complement of snaps. So you have to say, what's the percentage where he was actually productive? And that 8.3 run stop rate and stop rate just in general, that's really massive. Next Gen Stats helps me calculate these, but ultimately it's like, when is he credited with a stop? And super important stuff. I can then use some computer vision to say, like, all right, well, what are we looking at here? Like, this team overall, like, they only allowed 208 rush yards over expected. So NFL, Next Gen Stats is like, what should be expected given this down distance and in yardage and situation? Which down are we on exactly? Why? What's the score, et cetera? And the Saints defense led the entire league with only 208 rush yards over expected allowed. So you're looking at this and you're like, well, what's the reason why? So then you try to attribute like singularity to each one. Like, so which players are responsible for that? So he exceeded the he's pick number 60. So it's not even like he was, pick number, 33 or, you know what I'm saying? So this is a guy who has exceeded expectations. And look, your girl's from Michigan. Like, I clearly don't like a lot of just by like virtue of my birthright. But no, I'm just kidding. I actually really like Ryan Day, but I like to give them a hard time every time I can. But at the end of the day, when you watch the effectiveness when he's on the field and how that forecast going forward, I mean, I have the Saints making the playoffs in large part because of everything this defense is about and can do. And he was a good addition to that, and a guy who has a ton of upside going forward.
So when you look at some of those things like stop percentage, what are some of the factors that go into that? Is that, a certain amount of less than a certain amount of yards allowed on a run or a pass play, or is there more that goes into what that metric is?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, you can stop someone, but if they gain 15 yards, like, well, that's a first down. So, like, no, thank you. But, it's how often are you putting people in situations where they're on to the next down? So now you're, it's first and 10, and then now you're second and 8. That's a stop because you're still, obviously you're not allowing first downs or touchdowns in that scenario. So it's really the effectiveness. It's a measure of the effectiveness of not allowing first downs or touchdowns. And there are some, I'm oversimplifying it. It's an effective defensive stop, not just the fact not all tackles are created equal. If you tackle someone, there was a stat a couple of years ago that I think like many of your safeties had more tackles than the corners. This is a long time ago. This is before, Marshawn Lattimore was there. Right. So and you're like, well, that's actually kind of contextually bad, because if your safeties are the ones doing these tackles, like, then they've gotten past your linebackers. Like, it's not necessarily always the best thing. So not all tackles are created equal. So this metric aims at how effective are you when you do that tackle? Is this a tackle that actually stopped the progress of a first down or a touchdown? Or is it a tackle that just shows up in the tackle book but they gained, 25 yards on the play? I'm exaggerating.
No, but that makes a ton of sense. And one of the things that I know, we look at sort of the scouting process for the New Orleans Saints and what it is that they like about particularly linebackers. They like those hard-nosed, more built-up linebackers, 6'2", 6'3", as opposed to maybe the modern-day Philadelphia Eagles linebacker, for instance, that like could also be a safety. Like, they really like those guys that can sort of be all around. You look at his film, and of course, film and analytics are, tools, right, to use to, try to complement one another, right? You look at the film, you certainly see that, and it sounds like the analytics absolutely back that up as a part of his game as well.
Yeah, the whole point is to have things be in context, right? Like, you can't just like take, obviously, like, you see some great plays. Some players, I guess, when you see it with your eye, it's very easy to see. Like, you can tell that Michael Thomas was having a really good year. Right. Like, it would be pretty hard not to tell that. Sometimes with linebackers, especially, it can be really hard to see the impact that they're having, especially if if you've never played linebacker or you don't know what the assignments are. The NFL in general, in the middle of the field, is changing. Like, you're seeing all these different strategies to use like 6 defensive backs or at least 5 on many plays. So, it changes what the linebacker is supposed to be doing in that scenario. So the point is that, he's kind of like a bit more of like a throwback linebacker than he is like a he's more like 10 years ago, maybe you would have seen these nasty tackles, or you would have seen more of what he does as like super visible to your eye. Now you have to watch it in the context of like what he's allowing the other guys to be able to do because he's taking care of his assignment. So that's the kind of thing where it's like, the linebackers, I will say, in learning how to watch football, linebackers remain to me to be the most difficult position to completely understand, because a lot of teams are now using them in completely different ways, throwing your girl off, whatever.
All right, y'all, more with NFL.com analytics expert Cynthia Frelund here in just a moment. Going to speak a little more on a previous underappreciated New Orleans Saint. And we're going to talk a little bit more, too, about how she expects the New Orleans Saints to perform in 2022. We got all that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at BlueNile.com, where you can celebrate all of life's special memories. So if you're looking to create a custom engagement ring for the woman of your dreams, maybe you're looking for giving a gift that's a timeless kind of classic and a timeless jewelry piece, well, they've got you all taken care of, and they're going to do it for you over at BlueNile.com at the prices that you won't find at a traditional jeweler. So whether you're ready to pop the question, because they have a fantastic gallery collection, by the way, which is really, really beautiful, or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find whatever it is that you're looking for. Find that jewelry piece as unique as the person that you love with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. No matter what you're looking for, they also have experts on hand. Jewelry experts are on hand 24/7 over at BlueNile.com. So make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Sports listeners also get $50 off of purchases $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings, by the way. Of course, if anybody, 'tis the season, if you will. Use promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured. It ships direct, and it arrives in discreet packaging so that it won't give away the surprise that's inside. So shop stress-free and find your forever piece at BlueNile.com today. And I also want to tell you a little story about RockAuto.com. Rock Auto is the number one place that I go for any of my auto parts needs. In fact, I just got back, literally, as I'm recording this, just got back from the auto shop, bought a side view mirror that needed to be replaced on my car, went to a shop, well, had it shipped, first of all, bought it through rockauto.com, had it shipped at like half the price of what the quote was over at the auto shop. Then I took it to the auto shop and said, okay, now change it. I paid like $50. They changed it. And then I was out the door in less than 45 minutes. Didn't have to wait days for them to get the part in or anything like that. I was able to do it on my own timeline and on my own convenience. That's why I love rockauto.com. So whether you drive a Ford or a Fiat, a Dodge or a Daewoo, doesn't matter. You're going to be all taken care of over at rockauto.com with their extensive and user-friendly collection and just sort of selection of parts, pieces, and accessories that you're going to find instead of having to pay 30, 50, sometimes even 100% more than what you're going to find over at rockauto.com if you go to those, stores. So don't do all that. Just head over to rockauto.com today. Let them know what it is that you're looking for. Don't forget to let them know, though, when you get to your checkout, that Locked On sent you by writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks as always for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. So wherever it is that you find the show, make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with the daily content Monday through Friday. That's our off-season schedule. Nothing is changing. I'm moving later on, and I'm still going to give you 5 days a week. Watch me do it. Okay. I also want to tell you about our listener survey, Locked On Podcasts, plural.com/survey. Let us know what you think about the network, what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to hear more of, how you watch, all of that. Let us know what you think about the Locked On Podcast Network and what we can do to better serve you, those of you who helped build this network, because you absolutely did. So go check it out, lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. Now, Cynthia Frelund, we're not done. We had a lot of fun here having a bit more of our conversation around underappreciated players. Somebody that was a previous underappreciated player that is one of Cynthia's favorite New Orleans Saints, and also talking a little bit about how these Saints are going to look in 2022. And Cynthia believes in the New Orleans Saints, and she's going to tell you why. Does the impact, well, you mentioned the 5'6" defensive backs. Of course, usually when that happens, that means fewer linebackers are on the field. So that changes everything in terms of their responsibilities and what you're trying to gauge from them, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
So you have to factor in, like, what was the strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I said, not all tackles are created equal, right? Like, not all stops, not all even interceptions are created equally. Like, all of these different metrics, like, when I look at like a Cam Jordan, for example, like his is one of the easier defensive positions to understand. Go get quarterbacks. Like, stop it. Go, right. But you have to also see like, okay, well, what does he do on a running down? Like, these are things where it's like, okay, you have to account for the fact that each player is 9% of what's going on, right? There's 11 players. So
right.
You've got a little over 9% for each player. And, it does actually matter if you're creating space. In the middle of the field, we've seen an increase in pass catching tight ends. There was one in Tampa Bay last year that the Saints figured out how to stop, right? Like they're all over the league. That the way that the slot is now a completely different value proposition than it was just 5 years ago. So if you're looking at defending the slot, that's the middle of the field. So the linebackers and the anyone who's in the middle, safety, corner, whoever you're going to put in the strategy it all has to be aligned. So it's it's really interesting. And I will tell you, I've not said his name yet, but that other player that plays with him might be the one that I may have made mention to. It does help that he gets to learn from a guy like that, because no one has been, in my opinion, in my math, no one has adapted to the changing requirements of linebacker more than Demario Davis, who by the way is an All-Pro, which why he couldn't go on my list.
So Demario Davis has been on your list before, but of course,
and then he was an All-Pro, so I felt very vindicated.
That's great. So you've watched him. I mean, year after year, we've seen him now with the New York Jets, the Cleveland Browns. We're moving to Demario Davis now, and now within the New Orleans Saints. Do you still he has the All-Pro, but does it still feel like he's a little bit underappreciated, maybe from the national scope of things?
He's definitely underappreciated from like I said, he unfortunately you had too many good people on your team that did fit the criteria, which is a compliment, and that's a good thing. It is a bad thing if I am picking a first round pick on your team. I don't mean to throw shade at the Falcons, but
please, you're welcome to throw shade at the Falcons here.
but that's not a good thing if I'm having my one caveat is your team. So look, like Demario Davis is completely underrated, completely underappreciated. But I think at least from the All-Pro, to me, that's the best honor you can get. Those are actual football people getting it. So I have to stay a little true. At least that's the one rule I can't really break.
That's
right?
fair. Yeah.
But All-Pro, okay. Like at least the people who know have already voted you into it.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully the sort of depth as well as the trust that you put into Demario Davis, we now see here with Pete Werner being named. Maybe he ends up, having a similar career trajectory as well. If there was one piece of his game, Pete Werner, that you would say to watch to improve in 2022, is there one that jumps out in particular?
Well, you have different safeties, right? Like, I mean, when you have a guy like Malcolm Jenkins retire, who was like, we always talk about like the leadership and what you do, like, leadership and what you can teach. Like Malcolm Jenkins telling me where to go, I don't have to think twice. I just do it, right? Like if Malcolm Jenkins were to give me some advice, the answer, there would be no thought. Just tell me where to go. You got it, bro.
Yep.
And they're going to have to, no matter what, you don't have that presence anymore. I don't care who's there. My point is there's nothing to be said about, but this is not a guy who's easily replaced. Like he isn't. So I think the responsibilities in the middle of the field, like we talked about, and the spacing is going to be a bit different this year. Okay. And I think that's like, it's all good. Like they have time and they have improvement. And this is not a bad thing. It's just something that I think that will look different. And I think you'll probably see some more modern elements be put into Pete's game, meaning like he'll probably drop back into space a little bit more than we've seen in the past, which is like, I think he's fully capable of doing. I haven't seen their I don't know their playbook yet, but we haven't seen anything from that. But I can imagine that given the changes, you're just going to have to reconfigure a bit of that space. So, I think this is something he's fully capable of doing. Like, I think it's going to be pretty cool to see how he grows into that, because you're not moving Demario around. You know what I mean? You're just not.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, he's got his spot for sure. They know what they're doing with him.
They know what they're doing there.
Well, the New Orleans Saints have shown that they very much trust and like Pete Werner. We're hearing it now from the one, the only Cynthia Frelund. Cynthia, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on Locked On Saints. Talk a little Pete Werner and beyond. We appreciate you so much for taking the time and coming through.
Got it. And when you're in the playoffs, I would like everyone to notice that I put them there early, because on game day morning, the number one thing that I beat my coworkers on is picking the Saints. And like for 2 years, I've had to lone wolf and the Saints have come up big for me in both of them. So
there you go.
Don't be surprised when you're in playoffs because I said so.
Now you do win projections as well. Where were you set in terms of your win projections for the Saints, and what does that mean in terms of like that playoff appearance for them?
Yeah, wild card. It's going to be hard in general. Like the Bucs have a pretty decent schedule, so I have you guys as a wild card, but I like it. And honestly, once we see what happens in some of this, like I'm really excited to see. I can't remember what number. I know you're in my top 10 of offenses. I can't remember if it's like, let's call it 7. I'm sure I could look it up or whatever. But
yeah,
I think this is going to be a really special offense to watch. I'm excited to see. Obviously, I really would like Michael Thomas to come back to like bring my vision to life. But what I'm imagining now from all of the additions and like, wow, I think it's going to be very fun, and I'm excited to see what happens. And I'm like I said, I would really little asterisk there. We need a little Michael Thomas to come back.
Yes, of course. Now, okay, good conversations are always hard to end. So I just want to highlight something that you just mentioned. New Orleans Saints offense in the top 10 of offenses. Looking back just a couple of months ago, I just want to highlight how different and sort of the change, the sort of regeneration of what that personnel is now, that they end up in that ranking in terms of a top 10 offense, because a couple months ago we wouldn't be talking about that.
No, you wouldn't at all. Obviously when you look to see like, all right, what are the things that matter? I mean, I think people sometimes forget about the value of the O-line and how you have to take care of that in order to make everything work. Then you need to also be able to spread the field, but also have obviously the pass catching running back is a really special and important thing. And that only works though if you have the O-line that can support it and that you can stretch defenses. So you're not just like using a stacked box all of the time, right? Like, because facing a stacked box, no matter, I mean, I get it, Derrick Henry, but then we see Derrick Henry get hurt. Like it's a bad value proposition for everyone if you can't create space for your offense to work. So, I mean, the draft, the free agency, and then like, early free agency and then later free agency. Like, I mean, I'm reading all of these reports on how happy all of the receivers are. And, that's not the report we heard this time last year about receivers in New Orleans. So, they're happy, they're excited to work with Jameis. Maybe it's all smoke, but I don't think so. Like, I don't see any, like, it's June. Why do you care? Like, why would you even say anything if you're not happy? Like, why? It's a strange thing to lie about. So I think it's not a lie, right? So yeah, kind of how I view it.
Cynthia, we appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to come through. This is a phenomenal conversation. Hope to have you back on sometime soon.
Anytime. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I appreciate it.
Now
Thanks so much.
Hey, darn it.
Hey, we'll make sure we get you on when you come to New Orleans, all right? Once again, huge thank you to NFL.com analytics expert Cynthia Frelund. Make sure you follow her on Twitter at CFrelund, Frelund. Thank you, Cynthia, for taking the time to come through. Looking forward to seeing her back on the show here in just a few weeks. Okay, coming up next, a wide receiver that no one's talking about that you need to know about on the New Orleans Saints. We got that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, it's my pleasure to tell you about our friends over at betonline.net. The Warriors have evened up the finals series 1-1 with the Boston Celtics. There's another game coming up on Wednesday. How are you feeling about the series? How are you feeling about that game? How are you feeling about finals MVP? You can bet on it all over on betonline.net. They have everything that you're looking for, including how many games. You can get player props for each game, whole bunch of stuff there. And if you don't like betting on basketball, totally fine. You can get in on some end of season awards, looking ahead to NFL futures. You can get in on over-under for rookie production in 2022 in the NFL. There's also UFC, MMA, boxing, esports. Everything that you can imagine, BetOnline has you covered. So head over to the website today, use your mobile device or your laptop so that you can check out all of the trends and action over at the Locked On's exclusive betting partner, but also the number one source for all your sports wagering information. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at one wide receiver that no one's talking about that you should know more about. And I've talked about him before here on the show, but hey, not everybody catches every show. So I want to just quickly, before we dive back into and wrap up our best offensive line conversation in the NFC South, remind you about Dai'Jean Dixon. Dai'Jean Dixon, a wide receiver out of Nicholls State. You're going to hear a little bit more about him tomorrow. We've got Emery Hunt joining the show from CBS Sports HQ, as well as Football Game Plan. We talk a little bit about the sort of infusion or injection of local talent on the New Orleans Saints roster, particularly at wide receiver. And Dai'Jean Dixon falls under that category. 6'3", 200 plus pounds, a solid blocker. And he's one of those guys that's coming from sort of this UDFA, get it from the mud type of a situation, right? To where he's going to work and grind and grind and grind. And he's the guy that I'm waiting for. Remember Emmanuel Butler a few years ago where he just like took the top off of camp and everybody got super excited about him, but then he got into preseason and things just didn't really seem to work out for him and all that. I think Dai'Jean Dixon is going to be the first half of that with better production on the back end of that. And if the New Orleans Saints decide that they're keeping 6 wide receivers, if Dai'Jean Dixon could show that he can be a value in the blocking game, he could potentially trump Tre'Quan Smith. It's a reality, right? If he's able to show that he can use that big 6'3" frame and he's able to use that big 200-pound 50-50 ball build, and he's able to, show that and all of that and be able to contribute as a blocker, if the Saints decide to keep 6 wide receivers, he could be that 6 wide receiver. Another name to watch out for would be Easop Winston in case the New Orleans Saints want another deep threat to go along with Chris Olave and Deonte Harty. And they kind of want like 3 big-bodied guys in, let's say, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, and Marquez Callaway. And then you get the 3 speedy deep threats in Chris Olave, Deonte Harty, and Easop Winston. Not a bad makeup either. But with the New Orleans Saints consistently leaning towards the bigger build of wide receivers, we'll see if that prototype starts to change post-Peyton. But as of right now, they have the options on the roster. And Dai'Jean Dixon out of Nicholls State is definitely one to keep an eye out on, especially as we get into training camp and we start to see things get a little bit more, 11-on-11 drills and full contact drills and things like that. That's where his physicality is really going to stand out and take center stage. And that might be the place where he puts up some pretty convincing performances that get him a lot of opportunities in the preseason. And finally, we're going to wrap up our look at NFC South offensive lines, and we're trying to project ahead here a little bit, but taking a look at the run game. And now I mentioned, Atlanta and Carolina are out of this conversation, right? It's really between the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if we look at the run game, there are some assumptions that we have to make, but this is so tight between these two teams. So the way that I did this was that I broke things down by position. Runs to the left tackle, runs to the left guard, runs to the middle left and right for center, runs to the right guard, runs to the right tackle. Anybody that just heard me say that coaches offensive lines, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Because I know it's not that simple, but this was the easiest way to break it all down, get averages and things like that. Sometimes a run goes to the B gap when a left guard is pulling. So if that ends up being a negative play in a misdirection, that's not the left guard's fault because the left guard was told to pull to the opposite side of the field and it was up to the left tackle to then make the, to set the edge or whatever. And so because of like little things like that, this is an imperfect system, but it's a good starting place and it puts every one of these players on the same sort of criteria so that we could talk a little bit about how impactful they are in the run game. So I had to project 2 things in this. The first one was for the New Orleans Saints at left tackle. Obviously didn't use their rushing stats from last year. I used University of Northern Iowa's rushing stats from last year, running behind Trevor Penning. So we'll have to sort of hedge a little bit based on the fact that you're taking a jump to the NFL level. However, made a similar assumption over on the Bucs side at left guard because Aaron Stinney didn't play but 52 snaps last year, so not enough to really look at there. And Luke Gadecki, who is the collegiate right tackle that the Bucs could move to left guard, how are you going to take his production in the run game at right tackle and translate it to left guard? So I kind of just had to assume an average of 4.0 yards there, right? A little bit above average, but not like super good production at all. So when I look at all this, just to go left, I'll compare them, Saints and Bucs by position. So left tackle, the Saints 4.6 yards per carry. That's how much, that's the average yards per carry that you and I got behind Trevor Penning in 2021. At left tackle with Donovan Smith for the Bucs, 4.3 yards. So advantage Saints in that case. The left guard for the New Orleans Saints, 12 rushes, 48 yards behind the one and only Andrus Peat. And again, it's loose, right? But still 4.0 yards on that average. I assumed a same 4.0 yards at left guard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because, again, I can't rightfully take... I'm already kind of bastardizing the run game for anybody that coaches offensive lines right now. And so I'm not about to take projected stats from right tackle and then apply them to left guard. I'm sorry, I want to keep my job. At center, the New Orleans Saints 88 rushes, 383 yards behind Eric McCoy, using only the games that he played, 4.4 yards per carry. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it was 4.5 yards per carry behind Ryan Jensen, who played the entire season. At right guard, the New Orleans Saints 26 carries for 111 yards, 4.3 yards per carry behind Cesar Ruiz in the games that he played at right guard. Remember, he played the first handful of games of the season at center. But the thing that was really interesting about watching is that you saw a lot of like 2 rushes, 2-yard games early on, 2 rushes, 2 yards, 1 rush, 3 yards, stuff like that. Then all of a sudden they kind of started to boost, like 5 rushes, 49 yards, stuff like that. So you saw the run game start to click in that direction. I'm not going to say for Cesar Ruiz, but there's a lot of faith in Cesar Ruiz right now. And so I just want to highlight that there was an uptick in rushing production to that side of the ball, and specifically behind him. However, at right guard, Shaq Mason, who I was able to grab the Buffalo numbers from and then apply to what the Bucs might be looking at going into 2022, 4.8 yards per carry there. And then for the Saints at right tackle, 4.4 yards behind Ryan Ramczyk in the games that he played. For Tristan Wirfs, the worst out of all of these, 3.9 yards per carry. So the averages amongst all that were New Orleans Saints 4.34 yards, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 4.3 yards. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? These two teams are so tight in terms of the production that they had last year and trying to project it into this year. The Saints have better potential in terms of draft position, and the Saints have better potential in terms of years cumulative in the system. But big question mark at left tackle, big question mark at right guard. The Bucs, big question mark at left guard, big question mark at right guard, right? How well is Shaq Mason going to fit into their scheme as opposed to what he came from, which is Buffalo's scheme? Are the defenses in the AFC East worse than the defenses in the NFC South? Yes, they are. They're terribly, terribly different. So how does that impact a guy like Shaq Mason coming in, right? So I think the thing is you kind of have to take this away and say, what are your biggest question marks? And how confident are you in each of these teams' ability to answer them? And Bucs fans are going to feel really good about their chance for their team to address all of their question marks in a positive way. Saints fans are going to feel really, really good about Saints' ability to do all of that. But I got to tell you, if you ask me, I think I give the edge to the Saints. People are going to hate me for doing that because it's going to feel like a homer take, because here I am saying, well, Saints fans are going to like this, Bucs fans are going to like this, and now here I am saying, well, the Saints are going to have the better situation here. But I just simply think the Saints are going to have the better situation here. That's my take. All right. Coming up tomorrow, Emery Hunt at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter, CBS Sports HQ Football Game Plan. He's coming through. I'm so excited because we got Louisiana boy ready to have this conversation about this New Orleans team. And he's going to tell you why he believes that the New Orleans Saints are not just going to be a team to compete within the division, but might walk away with it. So we'll have that coming up for you tomorrow on tomorrow's episode. I appreciate you as always for coming through and making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL. All the news around the league that you need in less than 30 minutes. You can catch Luke Braun and I live later on today over on the Locked On NFL YouTube page, and the podcast we've hosted, of course, everywhere that you get your podcast. As always, y'all, thank you so much for making me a part of your day, a part of your routine. I'll see you tomorrow for everything you need around these New Orleans Saints in between these episodes. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.